Welcome back to the Fantasy Trading Room, hosted by FaceOff Sports Network. And today we're going to be diving into the best Week 7 waiver wire pickups. Not only are we going to be talking about some of the running backs and wide receivers, but also a quarterback and tight end that you need to pick up for all these bye weeks and injuries. It's been a crazy time in the NFL. But let's kick this off with the obvious topic, the 49ers running back room. So assuming CMC doesn't play, we're going to be having to pick up Jordan Mason or Elijah Mitchell. Now, right now, I'm actually leading Jordan Mason because he's just looked like the better overall back. Elijah Mitchell has really been banged up and not very productive in the past few weeks. Although Kyle Shanahan has said how good Elijah Mitchell has been in the past, how he's been with the team for a long time. But he's also said that Jordan Mason has looked very good as of late, and he doesn't know about Elijah Mitchell and his injury status. So that's a pretty big thing to note. But of course, we're probably not going to get a clear-cut answer by Kyle Shanahan until at least later in the week. And even then, it's still going to be, a pretty close to a 50-50 guess. But in my opinion, I feel like they're going to deploy Jordan Mason. It really looks like they're going to roll with the hot hand. Mason has looked really good as of late. Week 5, he goes out there on 10 carries, scores 13 fantasy points, averaging 6.9 yards per carry. Week 6, comes right back at it, only gets 5 carries, but 27 yards, puts up 8.7 fantasy points on 5.4 yards per carry. I mean, in this great offensive system, which is phenomenal for running backs, no matter who's running behind that offensive line, it really just looks like Mason's been the more efficient back. I mean, we all know what Elijah Mitchell has done. I'll admit, I drafted him as a handcuff for this exact scenario. If CMC goes down, he's like great in the past, but this year he's been banged up. I mean, week 3 averaged 3.8 yards per carry, put 7.4 fantasy points up, and then week 6 obviously wasn't, -3 rushing yards. Again, it doesn't seem like he's fully healthy, but he just hasn't been hot. I expect him to roll with Jordan Mason. He's rushed in 1.4% of leagues. I'm picking him up as my number one waiver wire priority or over Elijah Mitchell. That said, I'm still picking up Elijah Mitchell if I can. He's the next guy. I mean, we kind of talked about them back to back, but Elijah Mitchell is a guy who still has a ton of upside. I think it really kind of depends on where he's at in his injury status. If we're out here saying that he looks full to go, Kyle Shanahan says that we really like Mitchell. We expect him to be, getting a very large workload come Sunday. Yeah, that's great to have him on our bench because he can pop out, explode for 20, even 30 fantasy points at a time. We've seen it happen before. It's just he has that elite level ceiling that we're not necessarily sure that Jordan Mason has. However, I would still be going Mason. But after that, we're going to skip into the wide receivers and talk about a guy that has popped off early in the year. Week 1, Kendrick Bourne goes out there and scores 24.4 fantasy points. And after that, he has been rather disappointing, scoring less than 10 fantasy points a game. It's really hard to sit here and say that Kendrick Bourne is a long-term, flex option. However, we can't really just go and ignore a guy that has flashed once before, commands 11 targets, clearly the number one option. And I think the reason Kendrick Bourne is intriguing is this Patriots offense can get a lot better. Now, surprisingly, they passed the ball a ton this year. And I think if that keeps up, obviously we're going to be looking for a guy that is a wide receiver 1 in this distraught Patriots wide receiving core. I mean, year after year, they have no true wide receiver 1. But even Ramondre Stevenson bounced back last week. I believe he scored 18 fantasy points. So this does give me hope that this Patriots offense can elevate. It does kind of just seem like they hit a very, very tough part of the schedule. I mean, I'm not expecting the Patriots to be an elite team. So when you combine a rather average offense with some hard matchups, it kind of makes sense that they'd struggle. But I think Bourne is really intriguing because they're going to have some easy matchups down the road. They have one of the easier schedules in fantasy football. So if you're getting some easy matchups where you want a Patriots receiver, we're all destroyed by injuries and bye weeks, I think Bourne could definitely be a flex play at some point down the road. Now, I'm not sure if it's next week, but once we see him go up against a really good matchup, I'm totally fine adding them to my bench with, assuming that you don't have a stacked bench already. We're looking at guys that are really banged up. Benches are completely cooked by now. I think he makes sense to add to the bottom of your bench. But let's go over the quarterback and talk about my guy. I'm pretty sure we talked about him about 2 times already, and I really hate repeating guys on here, but Sam Howell has just looked like an absolute baller from a fantasy football perspective. I mean, he's averaging around 18 points a game, right? This isn't elite level quarterback numbers. We're not getting up there with Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen, but I've never really understood the Sam Howell hate. He passed the ball a ton, not every single week. I mean, week 6, he only had 23 passing attempts, but we know he has the ability to go out there and throw the ball 51 times like he did against the Bears. He has rushing upside, and he is a pretty solid quarterback. I understand that he was a 5th-round pick, so from a dynasty perspective, we're not talking dynasty, but I'm not sure he has the long-term upside to be that franchise guy. But this year, I really don't see any way that he doesn't continue to be their starter every single week. And by nature, him having that rushing upside, throwing the ball a ton, and being a solid quarterback overall gives him the ability to be a low-end QB1 in fantasy. Now, I understand he had a horrible game week 3 against the Buffalo Bills, throwing 4 interceptions, no touchdowns, and scoring 0.6 fantasy points. However, I mean, you look at the other games, 15 fantasy points, 21, 19, 25, 18. He's just looking really, really solid. So last week he had 18.34 fantasy points. I mean, Justin Fields is down with injury. Anthony Richardson is done for the year. These are quarterbacks that are on a lot of 10 or 12-man rosters. I will personally be adding Sam Howell to fill in for Justin Fields, and I would recommend you doing the same. Again, he's not going to replace Justin Fields scoring 32 points like he's done earlier this year. But, I mean, we saw in that same game against the Bears, he scored 25 points. So is he a league winner by any end? No, he's not. But he's rostered 91% of leagues, which I think is ridiculous. He should definitely be a low-end QB1, and I'm going to continue ranking him as that every single week until his roster percentage eventually goes up, and I can no longer add him to this list anymore. So for the last guy on this list, let's talk about Michael Mayer real quick. I think this warrants the biggest discussion because of how bad the tight end landscape has been. We got guys like George Kittle scoring 1 fantasy point last week. Jake Ferguson, who I thought was a low tight end 1, puts up 2.5 points when I need him to score 5. Very pissed off at him. But besides that, let's go kind of dive into Michael Mayer and why he could be a viable low-end tight end 1 in this train wreck of a tight end landscape. So coming out of college, he looked like the tight end 1 in this class. I actually had Mayer above Kincaid. I think Mayer was just so good in college. He dominated on Notre Dame, and it really seemed like he was the best overall tight end in the class. He was a great blocker. He was a great pass catcher, and I thought he'd get on the field early. However, everything changed when we see Kincaid go to the best landing spot possible, the Buffalo Bills, and Michael Mayer go to a less than appealing spot in the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Mayer early on in the year was not being used at all. I mean, he had 1.2 fantasy points in week 2, 2 in week 3, and other than that, a 0 in week 1, a 0 in week 4. But he was finally utilized for the first time in week 5, scoring 5.9 fantasy points. And then he had a big game in week 6, 5 catches, 75 yards for 12.5 fantasy points. I think that it looks like they were just easing him in. And we may have been wrong to call the Raiders idiots very quickly. I know I've seen that all over fantasy Twitter. Why aren't they using Michael Mayer? Well, it does look like they expected him to need more time to adjust to the NFL, which does make sense. And I think his usage will really continue to trend up. Now, Devontae Adams has been disappointing of late. Jacoby Myers, my most active wide receiver and underdog, has been fantastic, which is a great hit for me. But, there's still room for a guy like Michael Mayer. Now, the reason that I'm not over the moon like some of these other analysts are is the Raiders have Aiden O'Connell playing right now. And I think if he is productive, it's going to be later in the year. O'Connell has looked dreadful early on in the year, and I think he's a solid plug and play, but he's clearly not ready for the NFL right now. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I would feel much more comfortable with again, he's not a great quarterback, but so far he's looked miles better than Aiden O'Connell. However, Mayer is a great talent. I think he can really fill a need of tight end. So I would be rostering him right now. I think he should honestly be seen kind of close to Kincaid because Kincaid is the situation, but Mayer honestly has the talent almost up there with Kincaid. And I think his blocking ability is going to continue to get him on the field. Kincaid may struggle with that split with Dawson Knox. We will see. Again, I'm not saying Mayer is a must start going forward. I think, again, he is a guy that you need to pick up, stash on your bench for upside, especially at the tight end position, which is so weak. But if you have an opportunity to plug and play him, I would do so. I would assume that is once Jimmy Garoppolo comes back. So in my mind, I grabbed him from the waiver wire this week. I sit him. I see his role hopefully increase every single week for the most part. And then once Jimmy Garoppolo comes back, the Raiders find a favorable matchup. I plug him in there, shoot for the moon with upside, and hopefully he can fill these 10 woes. So this part of the video comes from a comment in our Facebook group. If you want to be featured, go follow that page. But some of the guys that I would be dropping to acquire these waiver wire ads are, we'll start things out with Josh Kelly if he's still on your roster. Again, all these are subjective to your roster makeup, league scoring, and all that kind of stuff. But Josh Kelly, in my mind, should have been dropped a long time ago. However, he is trending for the most dropped players on ESPN, all the way down to 29% owned. Josh Kelly was never the answer. I was on him earlier in the year. We saw that he's just a bad player, can't produce even with Austin Eckler's out. So in my mind, it doesn't make sense to have him. Even if Eckler goes down, we're not playing him anymore. We know he's not a good talent. There's no use for him being on my team at all. Then I would also go with, honestly, Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt had a big game, but it just doesn't seem like this role is going to increase. Kind of seemed like he got bailed out by that touchdown. Again, big game, but not sure if I love the player. I would happily move him off for any of the guys on this list. Then Matt Breida, again, same situation with Josh Kelly. We know Saquon Barkley's back. Even though Saquon Barkley was out before, Matt Breida was not a start either way. So assuming Barkley gets injured some point in the year, maybe that happens. We're not starting Breida either way. It does not matter. Then our last spot, we have Kenneth Gainwell. Again, these are all guys that are relatively low rostered now, about like 30, 40%. But I'd also be moving out a lot of these backup running backs, handcuffs, guys like Kenneth Gainwell, maybe even Cam Akers on the higher end of things. Just guys that even if they get the start, they're not a phenomenal talent anymore. Not a great situation for them because either their offense, the talent, just guys that I'm totally fine moving on from. So Kenneth Gainwell I'll be dropping. DeAndre Swift has this role in a chokehold right now. He's looking great. Gainwell is just not a very talented back. But that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed these waiver wire ads and then the drops at the end. Again, if you like this content, please come back for our running back and wide receiver rankings, which drop every Friday. And then, of course, we have these waiver wire videos every week as well, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.